Hello and welcome back to Massalia Tales. In the last episode we saw Eusebius liberate an old Iberian tribe in the northwest of the peninsula from the Celt-Iberian Confederation. The Confederation attacked Gelon, who was besieging them at Boii. He was able to get a nice downhill battle against them using his superior forces to win victory pretty easily. Then Bendis, Gelon's assistant, came to attack Nemesis nearby, auto-resolving his way to a costly victory, and then moving back to defend our recently taken province of Bibracte against a Carnute threat massing on the border. Coming down to help him was a new general, Herakleides, leading an elite army, the Eyes of Ares. Gelon moved on to attack Leminum, another Celt-Iberian held settlement. They came out to face him in the field, and similar to the battle at Boii, he just locked them in place and completely obliterated them with superior forces, also outnumbering the enemy. Herakleides moved into the final Celt-Iberian territory to the north, but had to go through Boii lands. This appeared to offend them, so now we're in a little bit of a bad diplomatic situation with them. Finally, he faced the Celt-Iberians' final stronghold, so now we're going to face the last major battle against them. As the fragile peace held fast, Herakleides found himself far from Massalian territory, facing an attack from a desperate enemy against his untested force. But he was a man for whom the raw theory of battle was more important than the perception. He trusted his men to find victory, and trusted that if he held true to the principles of the merchant republic that Massalia claimed to be, the Celtic peoples could still be dissuaded from starting a war that would devastate northern Gaul. But closer to home, Gelon and Bendis were eager to provoke a war that would bring them yet more lands and renown at the expense of their war-weary troops. So Herakleides faces his first battle against the Celt-Iberians. His army is a mix of elite troops. Here we can see thorax pikemen, a heavy pike unit, more heavily armoured than the sorts of pikes we've seen before. Placed very irresponsibly right on the end of the line, although in this battle it doesn't really matter about formation. Forming most of the line are the thorax legionaries, a Roman-style unit, heavily trained, heavily armoured, basically the best sorts of heavy sword infantry that we can field, at least in large numbers. So they have a massive long portion of the line right down the middle, hopefully just going to meet the enemy and engage them with raw superior power. And on the other end of the line, another squad of those thorax pikemen. And behind the line there's a whole load of pelters ready to bombard the enemy as they get close with javelins. Behind that even there's a little reserve of spears. We've got some hoplites and some thorax hoplites. These guys are a reformed version of the standard hoplite unit. I wouldn't say they're any better or worse, they're just a little bit different. So they're going to be in reserve as the enemy make their advance, but I don't expect I'll need them because my front line is going to be very robust. So the two lines are going to charge into each other, both sides bombarding each other with jabs, and then the melee combat begins, which is what I want to happen. I think the melee combat will go to my advantage. The enemy has a lot of militia units, these local swordsmen, who should easily fall to the superior training of my legionaries. So the enemy engage across the whole line. They've got loads of light forces behind the line who I'll need to attack. They don't quite outflank me, but they do give me some trouble on the flanks. You can see my pike unit, they're struggling to form up and getting themselves attacked quite heavily in the process. But once they get a coherent formation together, the enemy of course won't be able to break through, so the flanks will be very stable, even though I'm not really killing them. So once the enemy's light forces had been dealt with using my cavalry, which was relatively easy, those cavalry can slam into the back of these enemies. Like many battles we've seen against the Celt-Iberian Confederation so far, their lighter forces used to hold the line just aren't adequate. They really need to stop me from doing these rear attacks, and once I do, they just start to break all across the place. Here another squad is coming to attack their town champions from behind. Town champions, as ever, are the best fighters among the enemy forces, but they still can't do anything against my legionaries who are fighting pretty much without casualties against the enemy's best swordsmen, so that definitely means the enemy are in trouble. These lancers come in, smash them from behind, and they start attempting to escape. The legionaries press forward, destroying them. Well bloodied in their first battle, these legionaries, and an impressive start to what will hopefully be a continual campaign of victories for them and Herakleides' army. It's a heroic victory for him, his first victory, which surely will be spoken of in the city pretty favourably. He's going to start his rise to fame as a Republican warrior with this great battle. So now this means the Celt-Iberians' final major force is gone, so they're going to be in enormous trouble after this. Their main force there being defeated means the city is pretty much unguarded, and I should be able to auto-resolve, take it in the next turn after the end of this end turn sequence. You can see they're losing fewer than 100 men. They really didn't put a dent in our line at all. That vassal of the Carthaginians who recently I paid for a defensive alliance comes asking for a very steep amount of money for a military alliance. No thank you, I don't think they quite see what's happening here. And then some other guys over in the east come with a similar offer of defensive alliance. This happens pretty much all the time, every end-turn sequence. A lot of factions ask for a lot of money and some alliance or defensive alliance deals. Usually I just reject them. So now, as I said, Herakleides can take this city by auto-resolve without taking any losses in this nice winter siege assault. The enemy's remaining garrison spearmen, no match for the well-proven legionaries, who are now going to become even more battle-hardened as a result of another victory. So again, fewer than 100 losses, but I decided that Herakleides is not here to conquer this area, especially because it's part of some obscure province that I don't wish to capture. I'm going to liberate the owners of this place, giving me a forced ally up here on the northern part of Gaul, which overall I don't intend to occupy unless the circumstances come about that I really have to. But curiously, it turns out it's the Gallic Confederation who I liberated. They, of course, were the confederation that contained the Sequani back in the day, and the confederation that betrayed me, as I seem to recall. They also, I believe, had the Arverni, a long-term enemy of Massalia, as part of their confederation. So overall, a little bit of a strange faction for us to be liberating, but the decision is made, and Herakleides, being a man of integrity, is now going to stand by it and prepare for any Carnute aggressions. He what? Reinstated the Gallic Confederation, the ones that tried to stab us in the back. By Zeus, I think we have another man as stupid as Eusebius on our hands. He was meant to do what the Timucoi ordered exactly. I am the Timucoi, so why did he not crush those Gaulish rats like I asked? Cretheus has something to do with this, I know it. He talked that small-minded buffoon into a solution that made sure I didn't get a damn thing out of this. He's lucky these yokels are so much trouble, or I swear I'd be down there knocking the lights out of him. Maybe I should just enslave all these smelly Celts and be off to do just that. With the Celt-Iberian threat now greatly diminished, the major threat is the Carnutes, who you can see have got forces facing off against my own on these two river crossings coming out of their territory and into mine. Both armies look okay, but neither of them are going to be a match for the respective Massalian forces, so I don't mind if they want to challenge me to battle. Plus, of course, Herakleides here is free to move down to attack their only settlement if they did waste time fighting me on that border. So overall, I think I've got the Carnutes in check, so even if they did try something now, they probably wouldn't be able to succeed, and perhaps they'll be aware of that and not try anything. You can see here on the diplomacy map that we do have a possible problem with the Boii. They don't seem to like us, and they share a massive border with us, and they have a massive kingdom that rivals our own, meaning a war with them could be fairly dangerous. I want to avoid it at all costs, and I'm even willing to put a number on it by actually just giving them some money in an attempt to improve my relations, especially because money is something I have quite a large amount of. So I send over a gift. It actually doesn't really have any sort of effect here on their disposition towards me, because I should have given them even more. But I was willing to just go with that and see if their relationship with me improves over time. Now interestingly, the Lugii, another faction that are actually within the Boii kingdom, attack the Georsi, my ally. So now I'm going to have to honour that alliance and declare war on this random tribe off to the east, who are sort of in between the Boii's territory. The Boii circle around their territory. So they don't share any direct borders with me, but these two stacks that are now coming down into the area of Illyria are going to come very close to my territory. If the Georsi lose this war, there's a good chance that they will be bordering with me and will then be able to invade my territories here, so I am going to have to prepare for that. So this means I can't have my whole army just standing there facing off against the Carnutes. I need to start pulling forces back towards the centre, the core region of my domain, in case something goes wrong. So Bendis and the Heralds of Massalia, being the weakest of the forces there, are the easiest to justify taking away from that battlefront. So I'm going to start moving him back over towards that area just in case something happens. I'm going to move Cherisay up into the enemy's territory here, just to have a little look and make sure we can monitor what's going on. You can see there's Celt-Iberian forces in their territory as well. It seems they're harbouring their old ally there. Gelon should be enough to defend against these guys if they do make an attack, even though they do have 2 stacks, because Herakleides can always swoop down to support if things get dodgy. What I'm going to do is move Gelon back south towards Nemesis. Thus the enemy will see that both of the towns bordering them or nearest to them are unguarded, perhaps provoking them to actually make an attack, and once they do, I'll deplete them using the garrison, then counterattack with Gelon, immediately take the region back, defeating the enemy's weaker armies. So we should have a pretty good defensive strategy there.
Are you ready to serve?
I'm also going to recruit a few more troops under some random Timukoi statesmen in order to hold the line, just in case the Lugii attack very suddenly for whatever reason and come and attack me rather than attacking Deorsi. So I recruit a few pikemen and some peltasts to back up the garrison of the city on the eastern border in Noria. Now, in the next end turn sequence, we get a very interesting offer from our allies there in Brigantum. These are the tribe who we liberated from the Celt-Iberian Confederation, and for some reason they're at war with the Carnutes, the ally of the Celt-Iberians. And they want us to join, and this is a very interesting offer. It gives me an excuse to declare war on this faction which is posing a threat to me, which means I can get rid of that threat and not have to have my forces just be sitting around just in case something happened. But I am in a non-aggression pact with that particular clan. I think I'm also trading with them, so it's not an ideal situation. I will lose some integrity if I declare war on them. I wanted to see here if my new ally would give me any money in exchange for joining their war. They were prepared to give me a little bit, and negligible amount compared to my total wealth. So really this is just a decision as to whether I take this excuse to declare war or whether I attempt to maintain peace, because of course I could just withdraw my forces from the area entirely and work to improve my relations with these guys. Because now that I'm not really going to be at war with the Celt-Iberian Confederation, their reason to be hostile towards me will gradually diminish over time. So there is a peaceful solution to this, although it's a longer term solution. So after a very long time deliberating, I ended up making the decision that I would go to war against the Carnutes and try and solve this in the short term. I guess because I'm worried about what's going to happen in the east. I don't want either Herakleides or Gelon to be stuck on that battlefront. I'm going to need those guys quite shortly. So that means we now need to deal with those 2 Carnute stacks, which actually do have a chance to just rush out and take some of my territory if they want. The guys best placed to do that are Gelon, Bendis and Herakleides, of course, but Bendis is going to have to not continue his journey east in order to more quickly resolve the conflict here if he wants to get involved. So Gelon is going to move up to 1 river crossing to make sure the enemy can't go down towards Leminen, and Bendis is going to move over to defend Bibracte at another river crossing. So in both cases, strong defensive positions where even if both of the enemy stacks attacked, we'd have a good chance of defending, especially for Bendis, who would also have the garrison army of Bibracte backing him up. Gelon doesn't necessarily need those reinforcements because his army is just very experienced. For Herakleides, I can do a similar move. He can move down to another river crossing in the enemy's territory and defend that bridge. So now we have 3 strong defensive positions, and I'm going to see if the Carnutes make a move to attack any of them and give me a chance at victory, although they are fairly strong. And they do indeed do this. They move 2 of their stacks up to fight Herakleides. Probably the best choice because he is the least experienced of the commanders, although he doesn't have the weakest army. Still though, the balance bar is super far in the enemy's favour. They have more than double our numbers, and their second army has a rank 6 commander, a very experienced force which is going to be able to do some damage to my ranks, especially if they can outflank me. But of course this is a bridge battle, so the balance bar doesn't mean this is a case where I need to retreat. I can attempt to hold the enemy on a bridgehead, forcing them to not use their full numbers, and their inferior man-to-man combat ability against my legionaries should give me a good chance here. So let's see if we can crush the Carnutes whilst they think they're going to win.
As most of you know, across that river there are 3,000 weary Greeks, 3,000 fancy helmets, and 3,000 plague-ridden children. And for each of those rotting infants, we bring 2 battle-thirsty warriors, eager to prove their family honor and win the fame that crushing a prancing Greek brings. We have prepared long for a chance to take revenge for what they have done to our brothers and to our lands. Now, we see that our preparations were wise, for our position is more powerful than these wandering vagabonds could ever have imagined. Go now, bold brothers of the free Carnute kingdom, and dam the river with their worthless bodies of those 3,000 stumbling drones.
We're defending two river crossings here, a bridge and a ford. I've split my force up, but the enemy has put their whole starting force facing the bridge, and it looks like they're coming right for it, moving their forces forwards towards the beginning of the bridge. So I moved forces myself to go and defend that bridge, thinking the enemy were going to rush, try and get across this bridge before I could properly set up my defences. I'm putting the pike phalanx onto the bridge unit perfect for stopping the enemy from crossing and just locking them in position whilst I get myself in order. So the pikes climb up to begin defending that area, but the enemy, you can see, turn back. It appears they're moving backwards towards their reinforcements who are coming onto the map right at the back here. Looks like their directionality means they're heading to meet up with each other. So that gives me a little bit of time to finish off setting up my defensive formation. Over on the ford, I've got some legionaries positioned in a little mouth shape to receive the enemy as they come out of the river. I've also set up some pikes here, although shortly I'm going to move those guys back over to defend the bridge. I'll just have legionaries defending that area. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'm basically stacking lots of units on the bridge, trying to receive the enemy in the middle at first, so there's lots of room for me to maneuver and pull back a little bit if I need to, without giving the enemy a chance to come off the bridge. The downside though is that the enemy's army, which now has decided to come back, has all of these missile troops. I have virtually no missile troops on my side and none that can match the enemy's range. That means these enemies can just bombard me at will as I stand here on the bridge and they wait for their reinforcements. In an attempt to stop this, I send some medium cavalry across the bridge onto the enemy's side in a very dangerous raid, hoping the enemy would move away because they're on skirmish mode. But it turns out they weren't on skirmish mode, they just stand here, and my cavalry now have a hard time because there's loads of enemies throwing javelins at them. So they very unsuccessfully raid against these enemy missile forces. They kill some of them, but they don't succeed in getting them to move or drawing them into melee combat on the bridge. So overall, not very successful. Seeing that it wasn't working, I decided to pull my men back. Most of them are still alive, but then a last volley of javelins and slings completely wipes out about a third of that unit as they attempt to escape. Not very good, so I've wasted many good cavalrymen. The upside is that some of these enemy light troops decide to come up onto the bridge, apparently in pursuit of the cavalrymen, although they don't quite get all the way. So the enemy are still going to be able to just bombard this pike phalanx at the front. They're going to take continuous missile fire. The longer I stand here, the more I'm going to tank, but if I move forward to attack across the river, I'll be giving up that key defensive position. The rest of my cavalry, already positioned on the enemy's side, can't come in to help at this point because the enemy's superior cavalry have just sat in a position that blocks me from moving over towards the rest of the enemy's army, so they've got me held in check quite well there. Back on the bridge, I decided to send forward some thorax hoplites, guys with high defense, and a unit that I wasn't really intending to use to hold the line because they're not quite as heavy as the regular hoplite unit. They're more of a dynamic unit, so I sent them out to engage these light forces. My actual goal was to try and draw them backwards towards the main line and to divert fire from the pike phalanx. I'd rather the enemy threw their javelins and stones at this unit rather than the pike phalanx. And it doesn't really work. The enemy's slings, I think, just keep firing at the pike phalanx. Some of the enemy's javelins do come and take out my thorax hoplites instead, but overall the enemy aren't really reacting to this at all. You can see they've just got all their units standing there. They're going to wait for their full force to gather before they actually make their attack. So all this thorax hoplite unit is doing is drawing fire from the few enemy units who are already in range, and fighting with these light forces. In theory, they should win against them, but the enemy has a big numeric advantage, and bringing in more from nearby actually start to get rear attacks and flank attacks on my unit. So you can see their morale is dropping quite rapidly, and they're starting to lose men as well. On the other side of the bridge, I had to fall back with my pike phalanx. They've now lost all of their health and were starting to take actual casualties, which means at this point, slinger bombardments would totally wipe out this phalanx unit. So I decided I'm just going to give up on that position on the bridge and move back a bit. Unfortunately, the hoplites up on the front of the bridge rout at that point, so I didn't have time to move some regular hoplites up to take a more forward position on the bridge, the pikes had to just turn round and stand where they were and try and face off against these enemy light forces, as the rest of my thorax hoplites try to escape, but unfortunately the majority have already been killed, so that unit has been completely lost and really for nothing at this point. At least we've got the enemy now fighting against my defensive position. It wasn't as far up the bridge as I wanted, but it's not too bad. So these pike phalanxmen will now hold against the enemy, but they're still being bombarded by those slingers, and all of these guys have low health from the bombardment earlier, which means even those light troops do actually stand a pretty good chance of killing them. That unit, although it has a lot of men left, has lost the majority of its actual fighting power. So I've got the rest of my army in a big column behind them, ready to fill in the gaps when they fall. You can see there's this weird terrain glitch here, some of the cavalry enjoying a superior view because of it. So my men will now attempt to hold the enemy in that position and simply move up to replace the pike phalanx if it is defeated. And it is going to be defeated because it's taking losses quite rapidly. The low health, combining with the fact that it's not perfectly covering the entire bridge because I set it up quite hastily, means that they're being defeated and outflanked. Overall, the pike phalanx was unable to hold for very long, so they shatter and get out of there. I'm moving in a hoplite unit to try and fill the gap, but of course it means I've lost a little bit of ground. So as those pikes get out of there, my actual fighting unit is now right on the edge of the bridge, on the slope leading up to it. The enemy control the vast majority. They don't have to push me very far to get out of the bridge and start outflanking me, so it's a dangerous position to be in. And now the enemy decides they're going to commit all of their forces. They've finished forming up. Everyone's going to rush across this bridge. So the defenders, the hoplites hanging on the end there, are going to have a mighty push against them. Working to my advantage is the fact the enemy's forces are mostly tired because they didn't really rest after running across the battlefield. They've also sent a small detachment of mostly spears, not even that good spears, to attack the ford where my legionaries are waiting. This is a situation that looks much better. I expect my legionaries will be able to defeat those enemy spearmen, and then of course can move back to support the bridge or can go and attack the bridge from the other side if the situation allows. So here's the enemy's horde rushing across this bridge, pushing against my front line. The enemy's numbers vastly outweigh ours. You can see from the balance bar the enemy have a gigantic advantage at this point in the battle. So I'm going to try and rely on the fact that the enemy are going to tire themselves out fighting against my units one at a time to simply beat the enemy by attrition, or at least keep the enemy in place by attrition, and hopefully try and win out over there on the ford and bring men in to reinforce. Even if I can do that, it's still going to be a close call. We'll see what happens next time. Gelon was risking a lot in his treatment of the Celtic peoples. The Boii kingdom watched his moves carefully, and the Lugii, now openly at war with the Massalians by proxy, knew that their place in the world would be cemented by striking at the increasingly hated Greeks. But Gelon was not ignorant of these risks. In his opinion, shared by many Timucoi and council politicians alike, Massalia was equipped to subdue any enemies who made themselves known. These expansionist views were not unfounded, but had little consideration for the instability it would bring to their overgrown city-state.